Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am so glad to have you here with us, whether you're joining live or whether you're watching the replay. And most of you are probably watching the replay because of the time zone differences. It is wonderful to have you here with us. We're going to dive into some really valuable insights today that will help you see the apparel market with more clarity and confidence. In just a moment, after everyone gets settled, we'll jump straight in. Now, as we go on, feel free to make note of some questions. If you're watching this live, of course, you can enter it in the chat or whatever. However, for most people who are watching this as a replay, at the end, I'll put my email address. Feel free to email questions to me. I'll definitely respond to you. I love hearing from you. So please feel free to reach out if you have questions about anything. And if you disagree with anything I've said, okay, feel free to call me out on things. That's fine too. We're all friends. I always love hearing from you. So please take advantage of that. Now, today we're doing what we're watching in October. And this is part of a new series that we've launched where each month we provide a monthly snapshot of the biggest trends or developments that we see shaping the global apparel industry. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Jane Singer, Managing Director of Inside Fashion, and thank you again for being here. Each month, we bring you the key insights and trends from the industry so that people can stay ahead in sourcing, in markets, and what's happening in the trade in general. So let's take a look at what's making headlines this month. Now, today we'll be covering 3 trending stories. First of all, Indonesia's transformation. We see it developing quite a lot as an important sourcing hub, and we'll get into why the outdoor recreation market is booming right now and is set to continue that way and what the opportunities are. And of course, the latest on what's happening with tariffs, which seems to be a never-ending story. Now, let's start with what we see happening with tariffs so that we can get the elephant in the room out of the way. Tariffs is a really hot topic. It's a never-ending topic, it seems, but it keeps us busy trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And if you're on the supply chain side of things, how you're going to cope with it, and if you're a brand, how you're going to cope with it. But so far, everyone seems to be managing quite well. So this nightmare has plagued the industry, and like I said, it seems to have no end. And I think there are some interesting developments. I think ultimately things will start to calm down on account of the fact that no one's really winning with the elevated global tensions as they are. However, it's probably going to take some time before it does. So while it looks to be that we're slowly inching forward in between, flare-ups in between towards a little bit more relaxed situation with China and a little bit better terms with India and the US, we still have a ways to go. And brands, of course, and suppliers need to be prepared. But what we're seeing right now, and right now we're in the beginning of Q4, and we're seeing that on a day-by-day basis, while things longer term are unpredictable. Right now, overall, brands seem to be pretty confident that Q4 is not going to be as bad as some were thinking about what was going to be earlier in the year. A lot of inventory has been brought in early, so it avoided, the bigger hits from tariffs. That's been a big help. And I think that overall, people, at least what we're hearing from these major brands, they feel fairly confident they have programs in place that will enable them to cope. In the October issue of Inside Fashion, we have about, I think, 7 to 9 different brands that we've quoted in terms of how they are managing what they're planning to do to, weather this storm. So I think that, hearing in their own words is quite interesting. If you see this quote here from Morris Goldfarb at G3, I think it reflects the strategy that we're hearing from a lot of different brands right now, is that they've taken a multi-pronged approach, which basically is trying to figure out better sourcing, but at the same time understanding that some of this cost is going to have to be passed to the consumer. And also they're going to have to look internally and figure out where they can cut costs as well. Now, this is significant because typically costs, as we know, have always been passed upstream onto the supplier. And we're not seeing that kind of aggressive movement right now. We're seeing an understanding, at least in part, from the brands. The supply chain can't handle all of these costs without breaking. So therefore, we are seeing that recognition that some of this will have to be put forward as price increases. Now, that can be tricky because consumers never like price increases. Nobody does. But it's particularly complicated for brands who don't have a very loyal following. And I think that if you have a very strong consumer base, you're in a better position to be able to raise prices. Customers at this point know that these tariffs exist. They understand that the price might be a bit higher. As long as the price increase pretty closely reflects what consumers expect it might, and if there's brand loyalty, I feel that there will be acceptance at retail for these price increases, especially if brands are doing what they've said they're doing, which is taking a far more judicious approach, not raising the price on everything, but figuring where they can get a little bit better pricing at retail. And again, for brands that do have loyal consumer bases, they will be able to survive this. Now, for brands where you don't have a lot of loyalty and where consumers are already dissatisfied with the product at the current price, it's going to be difficult to raise those prices. I think those brands are going to find it to be very, very difficult. But I think that at the moment, it seems to be, from the brand's perspective, something that's workable. A lot of brands have been reporting optimistic guidance for Q4. So again, we don't know what's going to happen until it's over. But at the moment, it looks to be that plans are in place. The bigger concern obviously is heading into 2026, because at that point, beginning of the year, we may find that the general economic landscape is less strong than it is now. But we don't know. So we're just looking at what we see now, and we are watching that. And so as we get into November, we'll have closer insights into what we feel is coming forward for 2026. Now, moving along to sourcing, let's take a look at Indonesia. I think it's really interesting. In our feature on Indonesia, moved from being cost-driven to technology-enabled in our October issue, we really felt it was a standout sort of a development in Indonesia, that the nation is actually recognizing that it cannot win on cost alone. It just can't win on trying to compete on price with everybody else. So therefore, the only way forward, is to move up. If you can't move down and get cheaper, you got to move up and be better. And that's where this investment in automation and upgrading equipment and so forth is becoming so important. So I think that Indonesia has finally come to terms with the fact that this is the way forward. And it looks like there's some key developments there in terms of moving up the value chain. If you look at what's driving this to a great extent, there has been support from the government, which is important. The government has been providing some funding, right, to accelerate the move towards automation. And companies like Busana, Apparel Group, and PT Lebaran garments that are deploying millions in advanced machinery. So I think that, this kind of investment, they're investing that much in advanced machinery, as are others, not just them. I think that's a good signal. The result is going to be higher quality, lower defect rates, and certainly faster turnaround times. So, for example, factories in Jakarta and in the area are able to deliver with speed as fast as 18 to 22 days, which is a huge improvement over a few years ago. And even as you move out into some of the more provincial areas, both speed and defect rates have improved significantly thanks to this ongoing move towards what you might call smarter manufacturing. We have a table in the October issue that actually breaks it down by province and shows you current lead times, current defect rates. Pretty interesting to see how that goes. And then, it's opening up some important opportunities for brands, particularly as brands want to be more diversified in their sourcing. And right now, a lot of brands have really maxed out Cambodia and Vietnam, and they realize that you just can't put more and more into those same countries, even though they wish to. Thus, Indonesia will have an opportunity to gain more business if they're able to move up. And at the same time, brands will have another source in Southeast Asia that can handle some of their capacity. So I think that's an important development. And I think it's an opportunity right now for brands to be able to take a closer look at Indonesia. And another key development there, which I think is pretty interesting, is Indonesia's desire to further develop its domestic supply of raw materials. Now, Indonesia's always had a supply of synthetic yarn and synthetic textiles. However, cotton has also moved in there as well. So the key thing now that I'm hearing from several factories in Indonesia is the desire to encourage more inward investments from mills, from packaging companies, from trims and so forth, to be able to really provide a more comprehensive domestic supply of all the materials they need, which would be fantastic because it would help speed, it would get around a lot of different glitches that come up when you have to rely on importing materials. So I think that's another very, very important development. Now, if we look at the other factor in Indonesia that's also very important is that they're leaning into lean manufacturing. I think that's really important because, as we know, there's a huge trend towards being more sustainable in manufacturing, being more transparent, more traceable. And that's really, really important for all nations, but for Indonesia in particular, because Indonesia is close to signing a free trade agreement with Europe. Now, that would be a massive win for Indonesia. However, and also for European brands. However, for that to work, they have to be able to meet European standards. And those standards are really, really tough on sustainability nowadays. Thus, Indonesia has to be prepared for that if it wants to be able to capitalize on that free trade agreement. I think it's interesting to see that there has been investment in developing green manufacturing, and not only the manufacturing side of things, but to be able to create recycling and circular development and so on and so forth in Indonesia. That will be absolutely critical to making that free trade agreement a win, as we've been saying. And it'll be wonderful for European brands to be able to have that resource, as well as also U.S. brands to be able to source there. And particularly in a day and age where everybody is really being pressured to be more traceable and more transparent, to be in a place where you have all the supply chain in country, it makes it a lot easier to meet those demands for traceability and transparency, as well as speed because everything's there. So these are an awful lot of important opportunities that we see developing in Indonesia. Not 100% there yet. However, it's worth getting that on your radar, we feel, and keeping in touch with what's happening there, as opposed to sort of putting Indonesia on the back burner as it has been, right? Of all the Asian sourcing countries, Indonesia, in terms of volumes, in value terms, going into both the U.S. and Europe, it lags behind some of our leaders, right? For example, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, China tend to be the leaders. India, of course, is also gained a lot of market share. So I think that now may be the time to start getting Indonesia back on the radar. Now, moving right along, we want to take a look at what's happening in the outdoor recreational market. Now, every month in Inside Fashion, we try to cover a different, what we call a growth market. Now, growth market could be a category, could be a geographic area, any area that we feel offers an opportunity for our readers to find new growth, right? Should they choose to be interested in that market. So when you look at outdoor recreation, it's a subcategory, so to speak, from activewear. And activewear has been huge for so many years now, and it's sort of maxed out. It started, of course, with the big sports brands, but then it became more of a lifestyle kind of a thing. So every ready-to-wear brand jumped on it and, created their own activewear, athleisure wear line. Indie brands came into the market. Influencers came into the market, and some of the indie brands have become wildly successful, right? Like Bori or Alo Yoga, and others are small, but they have their niche. And then you even have individual creators, you might say, who managed to come up with some kind of an activewear offering. And the thing is, a lot of those products tend to be more basic items, right? Yoga pants, hoodies, t-shirts, caps, bags, not difficult items to make. So therefore, the entry point has been easy. A lot of times you can get these things and just do a bit of customization, and there you have a line. And you might say, well, Jane, those lines are not really big, and they're not. But the number of people doing this kind of stuff and selling it online is massive. So therefore, on an individual brand basis, a lot of those guys are not even on the radar. But the aggregate of it is something to be reckoned with. So that's the whole thing. That's why that's become so competitive in that market. Outdoor recreation, at least for now, focuses on a lot more technical kind of garments. So, it's harder for people to come into the market. It's a more elevated product. Also, it's performance driven. So I think that's an opportunity that we're seeing. So I think that, when you look at what brands are doing here and you look at the growth forecast, for example, 120 billion by the end of this year, a 9% jump over the year before. Impressive, right? You can see the opportunity is there. And I mean, what's fascinating is it's crossed over into lifestyle. So not everybody is going to be climbing rocks or hiking across rugged trails, but they don't want to look like they do. And they're willing to go for high-tech equipment, even though they're going to be wearing that high-tech jacket, maybe in an urban or suburban setting where they don't really need all that performance, but still, and there's a status to it. There's a quality aspect to it that consumers are resonating with. And you can see jacket prices are, quite high, $150, $300. Sneakers are priced high, and the sell-through is good. So it's something that people who are in this sector or a tangent sector might want to consider. In addition, we're also seeing opportunities for related gear that goes with this, which is also more of a high-tech thing, bags that are a little more high-tech, um, other things that come with it, gloves with warming components, all kinds of things like that. So we see that that's a great opportunity. And that opportunity favors bigger brands because you need the R&D to be able to develop all these functional properties. And you also need to be able to handle complex manufacturing. Unlike activewear, which, a lot of it, as I was saying, comes down to hoodies and yoga pants and t-shirts. These more technical garments are not going to be easy for a smaller player to tackle. And you really need to have a certain sizable sourcing arm to be able to achieve this, as well as the R&D capabilities. I think that's a good thing for larger brands because it will give them more of a moat. Plus the fact that these are more elevated pieces selling at better price points. And it's a good time to be in that market right now. And I think that's why you see, for example, Nike's expansion into trail and outdoor gear, is sort of a telling sign of where things are going. Because although Nike was dominant in running and more of those kind of sports, even though it has lost some of its market share, admittedly, but it's still a powerful brand. But they've seen the writing on the wall. And I think that their move into the outdoor category, this outdoor recreation, is quite interesting. I think we're going to see a lot more of the other sports brands coming into this, as well as their brands that are already in there that are established. They'll be seeing very strong growth. And I think this is particularly interesting, so I wanted to share it with you. The budget outdoor garment is often seen as a gateway purchase to customers who are going to trade up as they get more serious about sports. So that's really interesting because you're able to get that customer in a more affordable price, but as they get involved in doing these sports, apparently, according to the survey that we quoted here in Inside Fashion, um, that they'll trade up quite quickly to something more expensive. So again, all of that is a good, healthy market that has growth, and growth being driven by quality and by, what looks to be full price sales, as opposed to something that a lot of the other categories have gone to, which is essentially volume being driven by promotion. So I think that's very good. Premium brands like our Tariff and the North Face are thriving through quality and through storytelling. Decathlon's been doing really, really well with its entry price points. So I think that the opportunities here are really something that are not to be missed, particularly by anyone who's looking to see, how are we able to get into an area where we can drive greater growth at a good price? Because right now, it's not just about driving the top line, it's also about being able to get profits back to a healthy position. So if we wrap up pretty quickly here, like I said, I wanted to keep this pretty tight and focused. There's three key shifts that we're watching. Of course, Indonesia's evolution from price driven to tech driven. The fact that brands are carrying much more of the burden for tariffs, and that although tariffs seem to be a bit unstable at the moment, we're definitely seeing that brands are acting in advance and getting strategies in place. Mm. And also the fact that outdoor recreation is offering a big opportunity for brands to move up that very important value chain and to be able to create some new profitable opportunities. So we've covered a lot today, and I hope it's giving you a clearer picture of where parts of the market are heading. We've shared just a glimpse of the kind of intelligence that our members rely on each month in Inside Fashion to get a clearer view of the market. If you found today's insights valuable and would like to have this kind of perspective every month in greater depth, we would welcome you to join Inside Fashion. I would love to have you as part of our community there. We give you awesome market intelligence and benchmarking that's trusted by some of the world's biggest brands. And we're adding new things all the time. So please take the opportunity to join us and join some of the other leaders who are shaping our industry. We would just be delighted to have you there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found these insights helpful and they gave you a fresh perspective on where the market is heading. I would love to hear your thoughts or questions. What stood out to you the most this month? If you have a moment, drop me an email. I think you can see on the screen my email address is there. I will definitely respond to you. If I've said things here that you disagree with, correct me. I'm okay with that. And certainly, if you haven't already, make sure to join Inside Fashion so you can stay ahead with the latest intelligence and opportunities that are shaping our industry. Thank you again for joining. I'm Jane Singer, Managing Director of Inside Fashion, and I will see you again next month.